Very warm welcome to the Understanding Users podcast, brought to you by Researchable UX. It's great to have you with me. I'm your host, Mike Green. I'm a freelance user research lead and digital consultant based in the UK. Over the coming weeks, I'm going to be chatting to various digital experts who I've had the pleasure of working with in recent years. They're from various disciplines, including user research, UX design, development, and product management. And they'll even be a digital business owner or two. I'll be talking to them about how they came to be in their current roles, what they've learned along the way, and what advice they may have for others getting into the field. These are intended to be relaxed, informal chats with professionals who are keen to share their experiences. So sit back and enjoy. In this episode of Understanding Users, Jackie discusses the importance of always documenting things in the most impactful format to make sure they are seen by everyone, both in and beyond a service team. And remembering that not every user-centered problem can be solved immediately or indeed at all by a design team. She shares her thoughts on the merits of UK government digital service standards, both in creating usable constraints to design against and in holding service teams publicly to account. And she talks of the pleasure of going to work when you know what you are doing is measurably helping people in their lives. Finally, she plays my 3-card challenge to share her favourite UX tool, favourite technique, and a trend she hopes to see or not see more of in the future. Thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoy the episode. So my guest this time is Jackie Brownlee, and Jackie's a service designer, freelance service designer. Welcome, Jackie. It's great to have you on the show.
It's great to be on the show. Thanks, Mike, for inviting me.
To kick us off, it would be great to hear a little bit about your role.
Well, I'm an independent user experience professional, so lately I've been working in government. I've been there about 1.5 years, and my role at the moment is service designer. So I work on a service. It's part of a transformation project where we've got one service and we're transforming it over onto a different platform. And in the meantime, we're making all of these improvements to the user experience and making it a better system to use. My job as service designer is to see how that product fits in with the bigger picture. So how do people become aware of the service? How do they prepare for the service? How they use it? And what happens when they leave? So do they need to have support? What does that support structure look like?
So how, this is the $1 million question, I suppose, in many ways, Jackie, how can UX teams, service designers like yourself, researchers, content designers, ensure they have the biggest impact on the services they're developing and the stakeholders and the kind of wider user groups that they're building services for?
You go out and ask them. You prototype. You show. You understand how those prototypes are working for users, and you come back and you iterate them, and then you take it out of that test environment where it works for you and your team, and you put it out in the world in what we call private beta, where you've got a small subset of users, and you see what the impact is when you put it out in the wild. And it can often be very, very different from what it is in a lab environment. So, and then you go out and you measure again. So how are they getting on with it? What does real life look like? What are the things that you can zoom in and bring that gives the most impact to those users? I mean, you can change loads of stuff on the surface, but what really matters to them? And again, you're looking at a mixture of anecdotal evidence, gathering information, qualitative information from lots of people, and creating hypotheses, and also looking at the data behind it to back it up and make sure that your hypotheses are correct. What we really like to do is trace back to what are the benefits to the business and the user and quantify those benefits. So we will try our best to make sure that we're quantifying how many people are affected, how much it's costing, if it's a pain point, or how much a new feature will benefit the business. When I say business, I mean a government organisation which isn't run like a business, but we spend money to make the products that we create. So the less we're spending in one area and the more we're saving, the more we've got to create additional features.
Right. And you've talked about the business there, obviously the government organisation, but I know you've worked sort of both sides of the fence, if you like, both in the private sector and the public sector. What would you say is the difference in your experience of doing what you do or working in this world between the two different types of organisation?
Government digital standards. So those are the things that were brought in. It's the framework that we're working within government, which is so helpful to people in our profession. As you know, I know that you've worked in government before. So working, say, at a global bank, they do their best to make sure that they're standards-based. They might have a part of the organisation that looks after the standards. In government, we're really held to account. We go through assessments in which we are made accountable, and those assessments are published. And I guess in the UX profession, we work to that framework, and it's so helpful to us because sometimes user experience is the first thing to be let go. So having that set of guidelines that we can work to and say, yes, but we're not fulfilling this. We're not working across organisational boundaries and we have to, or we're not understanding user needs and we have to. That's great for us because it gives us leverage to be able to do the things that we're being paid to do, really.
Just taking a step back, thinking about kind of Jackie and her career, if you like, talk me through how you got to where you are.
When I was at school, I think I was perhaps a year above when they started doing computer science and teaching coding. So I missed all of that. You know, it wasn't, the computers weren't really part of my school life. So ending up in digital was quite unexpected for me. I did a degree in English literature. And when I came out, it was the middle of a recession, and I probably worked in most of the offices in Winchester, answering phones and doing typing. And I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I knew that I enjoyed literature and writing, so I applied. In those days, you used to get the Guardian and look in the job ads. And so I was applying for things like working in publishing. So when I was working in an office, I ended up at this place called MBA Systems, who did financial systems. And I never really got to grips with what that part of the business actually did. But I was working there as a receptionist for a week as a temp. And the boss said, oh, we've got a job as a receptionist. Do you want to apply for it? Give me your CV. I was like, I will give you my CV, but that's not really what I want to do. And he looked at my CV and he said, oh, I see you've got a degree in art. And I thought, well, actually, on my CV, it doesn't say that I've got a degree in art. I've got a foundation certificate in art and design, but I've got a degree in English literature. But I went along with it. And he said, well, have you heard of the internet? And I said, yeah, my dad's got it. And I didn't really know what it was. And he says, well, we need a web designer. Do you think you could do that? So I said, yeah, why not? So I got a couple of books and I started that job as a web designer. And I learned how to do HTML. And we were creating brochure sites for financial companies, just as a sort of sideline. Really, it was just, say, 5 or 6 pages to put their brochure online. So the design was already done, really. And I was using, oh my goodness, tables within tables within tables just to try and get all the layout made. We didn't have CSS in those days. But we did an okay job of it. And that part of the business really started to build. And as it went on, we got more and more sort of functionality that was fed through from the other part of the business, like the financial information. I mean, it became more than a brochure page. It became a thing that did something. So that's how I started out in web design, as a web designer.
And in terms of kind of your route from there to where you are now, you've done a bunch of roles, both, as I said before, kind of public sector and private sector, haven't you? And where do you see yourself going in the next few years?
It's been interesting. I've been lucky because I've always been at the sort of forefront of what's been going on, just because I started off so early. I was working, I went to London and I worked during the dot-com boom for a lot of actual financial journalism sites. I ended up working at Reuters as their web designer. And I got made redundant from Reuters. And with that redundancy money, I went off and I did a master's in research at Lancaster in something called the Design and Evaluation of Advanced Interactive Systems, which was essentially a user experience master's. And it taught me how to do research. And from then I went and worked at a consultancy, and then they took me and turned me from somebody who had been a web designer into a consultant. And it opened up this whole new world. It's like, how do I deal with clients? How do I make people understand what's in my head? And how do I kind of sell that bigger picture? It gave me so many skills to work for a consultancy and go through all of the training that they give you. I was really lucky to have that. And that was a real pivot point for me. It kind of shaped the person that I am. So I then was able, once I left there, to go into an organisation, not as a contractor who is told what to do, here's a job and this is what you need to do, but as an independent consultant who could go in, identify what needed to be done, and then say, okay, so what I'm going to do for you is this, 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 and this will be the outcome. I just feel really lucky that I'd had that. I wasn't a typical consultant. I only lasted 2 or 3 years, but those are the skills that I picked up from it. So from then on, it was really about it gave me the ability to pick and choose the jobs that I was doing, because I know that I really enjoy the experience of working as a user-centered designer, working with users. It's a pleasure to go into work and do that, and have an outcome that is kind of something that is useful to people. So I enjoy working in commercial, but I also enjoy working in government, because designers love constraints, and government and the standards that we work within give some great constraints, which actually can help me be more creative in the solutions that I'm giving.
Yeah, I really like that. That's absolutely true. I agree with all of that. So what advice, Jackie, then, or tips would you give to somebody wanting to get into this world? If someone came sort of coming in your footsteps and said, I want to end up where you are, what would you say to them?
I mean, it's when you talk to anybody in user experience, it's funny, they tend to come in different routes. They'll often switch from something like maybe as a developer, or a business analyst. I was speaking to somebody the other day who switched from a teacher, from a journalist. So the thing that switched them into user experience, I think, was that interest in, there must be more to this, to whatever it is that I'm creating and doing. Why do people do what they do? How can I help? And somehow they'll switch into that kind of research track. Getting into user experience in a kind of traditional way, you would probably go and get a related degree, maybe psychology or computing, and then you would try to go through the graduate track, either to a consultancy, like one of the big consultancies has a whole field of user experience professionals in there, or one of the independent agencies. You would try and get in on their graduate track. I think that if you were in a career which is kind of related to digital and you wanted to switch to user experience, what you need to show is that you are interested and and you are a self-starter. So if you're a developer, you would be going out and working with user researchers. Or if you didn't have a user researcher, you just do some research of your own and do some recordings and form some conclusions and then take them out. Or do something. I mean, if you were doing a blog or you can do a blog or a podcast or put something out on social media. Just test something, experiment with something and put it out there. And then you can build a portfolio of things which you might not have got paid to do. But you can show to an agency who is taking on kind of new recruits. I think that it would be a shame if you were providing that service and not getting paid for it. So obviously, if you've got a job as a developer, you're getting paid for that, and this is value added, this is extra. But everybody needs to pay the rent and put money on the table. And not everybody has the opportunity to do unpaid work.
And you talked before about what you really like about this world in terms of kind of obviously creating services that are beneficial to users. I'm interested to know the flip side of that. What frustrates you or challenges you or annoys you kind of day to day, week to week in terms of this world and what you do, if anything?
I'm pretty old now and long in the tooth. So the things that I used to find frustrating, like meeting a brick wall for something I knew was important for the user, I don't find as bad anymore because I have ways to cope with that. Not everything can be done at once. Yeah, so not every problem can be solved immediately, and actually not every problem can be solved. What I do to tackle that is to make sure that if I've identified a risk that users can't get what they want, or maybe there's a clinical risk that they can't get access to the data that they need, I'm putting that in front of the right people, I'm escalating it, and I'm getting it on a risk log. So I'm putting it in out and giving it visibility. And at that point, if that doesn't get taken up, I know that I've done everything that I can possibly do. I think what frustrates me is when people don't take, sometimes when people don't take no for an answer. Yeah, so there might be a good business reason, like we don't have enough money to tackle that yet, or we need to get this thing out first. And I find sometimes that less experienced, maybe designers or researchers, can get really upset and annoyed about that, and they've got nowhere to put that emotion and frustration, and they don't have the coping strategies to be able to say, yes, okay, even though this thing I found is important, it has to be prioritized. So I would say just having that bit of the bigger, understanding the bigger picture, that user experience is important, but actually creating a whole thing that gets out there is also important. So we can't prioritize one over the other. And people who aren't curious as well, that kind of frustrates me. So if they're just willing to accept something and go, oh, well, that's somebody else's problem. And I'll say, okay, but whose problem is it? You say that this is an issue, you're accepting it's an issue and that it needs to be dealt with. So who do I go to? Who can I take it to? Whose risk log can I put it on? And what does frustrate me is if it's like, oh, well, just leave it.
Where do you see your own career going? So this sounds like an interview question, doesn't it? But like if you kind of think a few years ahead, where would you like to go?
What I've found is that I enjoy spending a couple of years really pushing myself, going out of my comfort zone. So a couple of years ago, I was working as a design lead. I had 15 designers. We were working in a very high pressure environment. And my goodness, the amount of things that I learned that I didn't know before about how to work with a team of people and help them, about where the money comes from and the funding, and how important it is to get the funding right in order to make products and to make service teams work effectively. How important it is to understand the politics of what's going on. I learned a lot about supply chain, the supply of good people and bringing them on board. So that was great, and I learned so much from it, but it was exhausting. Then I'm in this job, which is well within my comfort zone, although it is like, it's a complex product and a really complex environment. I'm very happy in a big complex environment because I've worked in them a lot before. But I'm working well within my skill set. So it's great for me to do that and then consolidate all the skills that I've learned, and put them into action. And then after a couple of years of that, I will probably push myself a little bit further out, and perhaps more into a leadership role again. So that's the way that my career's always gone. It's been kind of do the thing, work really hard to learn it. Often it's a baptism of fire, and then do it again. Right, as a serial contractor, I'm in the lucky position that I can do it again and get better at it, and then do it again until I feel like I've got my skills built up and I need to do something else, and then I'll shift a little bit. And that's a good place, I think, a good way to go. I don't know whether you've experienced that kind of shift in your career.
I mean, really interesting hearing you talk about that. There's a sort of rhythm to it, isn't there? As you're sort of saying, you go outside your comfort zone and you develop the skill set, and then you do something that's perhaps less intense for a period of time to consolidate. And as you say, as contractors, I'm one too, we have the luxury of being able to sort of pick and choose what we do and where we go. I think it's really important. The flip side, of course, of that is, as I found in the past, is you can, if you're not careful, end up just sort of plodding is the wrong word, but you can keep doing what you do again and again and again, and you have to keep pushing yourself. That's why it's really interesting, and I really like what you're saying about kind of pushing yourself out there, and because it's otherwise you just stagnate. There's a risk of stagnation, I think, and particularly in the tech world, everything's moving so fast. No one can keep up with all of the news and insights and technology as it's evolving. But I think, government is I love working in government precisely because of the things you were saying earlier. The service standard and the fact that you've got these multidisciplinary teams, and there's usually stakeholder support, and there's budget behind it, and they do it right and they do it properly. Right, last thing, Jackie, the 3-card challenge. So I've got 3 cards here. As you can see, it's fairly lo-fi. So we've got an ace of hearts, a queen of diamonds, and a jack of spades. And on the back of each of these, I've written either the word tool, trend, or technique. So what I'm going to get you to do is pick one of these cards to start with.
Okay,
Ace of hearts is tool. So if you can tell me what your go-to, preferred, favorite tool is in your kind of day-to-day, week-to-week work, and why.
Okay, so this may surprise you, but at the moment it's Confluence and Jira. So Confluence is a kind of documentation system that all our developers and business analysts and senior leaders use. And Jira is the kind of agile tool set, which you create little tickets and you move them along. Okay. So as a service designer, I want to give visibility to the problems that I find. And putting it in Mural or Miro is fine for the user-centered design team, but it doesn't get out to the developers. They don't see it. What I found was that if I turn my 80 pain points that I'm following, my 80 user pain points, into Jira tickets and put them in an epic called pain points, and then I put them on a Confluence page, I could pull them into a sprint and show that we were solving them alongside the actual development work. I could show that they were being marked as done or still in progress, and it was a great way to share the ongoing progress of the service design work with people who were in different parts of the profession. And also because you see all this stuff going through Confluence, who's changed what page, what they've changed, what they're doing. it gave visibility to the senior leadership team as well. So if there's one thing that I've learned in this contract, it's the advantage of using Jira and Confluence to do that.
As you say, often in a user-centered design world, the sort of tool of choice is Miro, but going beyond that and surfacing it to people outside our world is very important as well. So 2 more cards.
Jack of Spades.
Spades is technique. So tell me about your preferred technique.
There's lots of techniques. So I never go for any one thing. You suit the technique to the thing that you need to do. So being innovative, usually to do with documentation, right? So I would say, as a general technique, document things. Doesn't matter how you document them, but do it in a way that people can see. At the moment, I'm taking personas, making a little video about them, putting a QR code on a printout of the persona and sticking them up on a wall. I'm doing a poster campaign so that people can kind of see those personas and videos around the office. So my technique would be documentation, but document in lots of different ways.
Yeah, that's really nice. I like that. And the last one, trend. Now, I know sometimes we all balk against what is the latest, coolest trend, but if there's a trend, maybe you like it, maybe you dislike it, maybe it frustrates you.
I think an interesting trend would be to get more junior permanent people within organisations. So it's great that I'm employed as a consultant or contractor, and there's lots of very, very skilled and expensive people coming in. But we also need to be bringing along the next lot of people. And I've got a whole ton of stuff, which is just, really winding the handle. It's kind of day-to-day work that I would like to be passing on to other people in the team. But we just have this lack of kind of junior people in the team that you can... It's not fobbing off the jobs that you don't like. It's giving people really detailed work to do where they can understand the job that needs to be done, learn about it, contribute to not only the software delivery life cycle, but making a better service. There's a whole bunch of jobs like that I think we need to be done. And sometimes I think there's a trend towards just having contractors come in and do things, and a trend away from having perm staff that we're bringing along and really embedding within the organisation. And I'm not talking about the place where I'm working now specifically. I'm talking about, actually, that's a trend I've seen in commercial as well.
Why do you think that's the case? And it's something I've noticed as well across certainly various parts of government.
I think it genuinely is a trend. It goes in. So sometimes you see people and consultancies going, right, we're not having any more agency staff. We're going to build our own capability and we're going to focus on that. And then 5 years later, they're like, right, it's costing us far too much money. We can't do that. We've got to go to the consultancy model. It's genuinely is a trend. I think you need a happy medium, obviously, where you're not doing just one or just the other.
Yeah. Oh, well, it's been fascinating. So thank you indeed for taking the time to talk to me and for sharing all your experience and wisdom with us. Really appreciate it.
No problem.
Thanks for listening to the Understanding Users podcast. If you enjoyed what you heard, do please like or comment wherever you're listening, and feel free to share it more widely. And feel free, of course, to drop me a line with any feedback via LinkedIn or my website, researchable.uk. Links are in the show notes. Join me again next time when I'll be talking to another experienced UX professional and asking them to share their wisdom, tips, and knowledge and experience with me. Until then, stay safe and stay user-centered.